questions for this event in particular. And then we also have Daniel from the ILSA board, who is the head of marketing. And he is going to also be live streaming, has agreed previously on YouTube, because again, we received such a high demand for today's event that we're expecting that people will be also tuning in from our YouTube channel.
I'm just curious, have you done similar things in the past with other student associations?
Different universities and given talks at universities like Maastricht and recently Utrecht, Rotterdam. I did one in Utrecht, the one I referred to with my French colleague. And that was still live with people attending. But lately, as you can imagine, I have done more with virtual means. Mm-hmm. And we had different experiences there because, you know, some of the things we did virtually had the advantage of having more outreach, of reaching more people. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, to be honest with you, for somebody like me, it does make a difference whether you sit in a room and you can actually, in the interactive modus, see the reaction of people. Now I can hear it, but you don't get the feeling of the room, so to say. And that's sometimes a little bit difficult. I see somebody by the name Christian Heiming on the scale, so I imagine that is the first German here.
Okay, I want to welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here with us today. We are very proud to present the first edition of ILSA's Diplomacy Days. My name is Zainab Fayad, and I'll be co-moderating today's event with my fellow colleague, Lily.
Yes, hello. My name is Lily Smolarek, and I am a third-year International European Law student here at the Hague University.
Before we start today's much-awaited event, I would like to invite the President of the International Law Student Association, the Hague chapter, Bianca Maria Lehu, to briefly present our organization.
Thank you very much, Zainab. And once again, welcome everyone. Welcome Your Excellency, and thank you again for accepting our invitation and being here today. A few words about ILSA. ILSA The Hague chapter is a study association within the Hague University of Applied Sciences, and more specifically within the International and European Law program. The purpose of our association is to promote the study, profession, and development of international law. And in order to achieve such goals, ILSA works through different subgroups which organize events, workshops, and different projects. And these groups are the Main Events Committee, the Social Events Committee, the ILSA Journal Committee, and since this week, the debut of the ILSA Ambassador team. Thank you, and I'll now give the floor back to our wonderful moderators, to Your Excellency, and I really hope you all enjoy today's session.
Thank you, Bianca. Now moving on to officially starting today's event, just quickly for our attendees, we would like to tell them how today's event is going to proceed. Firstly, we will engage in a dialogue with His Excellency, in particular on his life as a diplomat. Secondly, we will get to know the bilateral relations between Germany and the Netherlands, and additionally, we will talk about several political issues. Sehr geehrter Herr Botschafter, im Namen aller deutschen Studenten möchte ich Sie herzlich willkommen heißen und Ihnen für diese Gelegenheit danken. We'd like to warmly welcome today's honored guest. His Excellency has a variety of expertise, amongst other distinguished positions, as he was the former NATO Assistant Secretary General for Political Affairs and Security Policy, the former political counselor in London and Washington, as well as the former Commissioner for International Cyber Policy. The Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Mr. Dirk Brengelmann, Your Excellency.
And very kind of you to invite me for this session with ILSA, which in German means like a first name, actually. Herzlichen Dank für die Einladung.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And thank you again for accepting our invitation. We are very honored to have you here, and we are looking forward to learning more about your journey. Now, we would like to start by asking you a few questions regarding your role as ambassador. So, seeing as you have vast experience in the field of politics, international relations, and diplomacy, as you served as the ambassador of Germany to Brazil and since 2016 to the Kingdom of the Netherlands, please tell us more about the steps you took to reach this position, particularly your domain of education and your career up to this point.
So I studied economics and business administration and history. So in a sense, that was also indicating that in the beginning, perhaps I couldn't make up my mind too precisely. So my burning, if you like, was for history. Ratio was saying, please do something about economics. That's good for later. The idea to become a diplomat has been with me for quite some time. I'm originally from Bonn, and Bonn used to be the capital in days past. So I had the kids of diplomats in my class. Bonn was close. So politics was always something I was interested in. During my studies, I became somewhat of a globetrotter. So I've seen many countries in my private time, so to say. And it kind of grew up in my mind. And I've done various different jobs being a diplomat, as you indicated before. For some time, I was more a multilateral diplomat. My last postings, Brazil and here in The Hague, are again in the bilateral field. And I find that fascinating that you have these various elements. This particular job here in The Hague has an additional advantage, which you all from ILSA are very much aware of. It is a job covering bilateral relations with the Netherlands, but I also cover the international courts and the international organizations. With one exception, we have a different representation for the organization for the prohibition of chemical weapons. There we have a particular office because that is deemed relevant and important enough to have somebody covering it, so to say, on its own.
This was really interesting. Thank you for all that information. I'm sure that such a job that is so demanding comes with a great number of challenges. So on this note, what means diplomacy for you, and what would you say are traits that define a great ambassador?
You know, they test you when you get into the diplomatic service, into the diplomatic school. They test you for your knowledge on certain issues like international law, by the way, history, politics, languages. But I think the real thing is whether you feel yourself, personally speaking, whether you really burn for this, because you must bring in your whole personality. You must have a keen interest in moving around, meet other people, and constantly change and adapt. Mind you, you have a biorhythm, so to say, of 3 years. After 3-4 years, you change the place. You go from one city to another. And sometimes in the beginning, you also change your job. You may have been in charge of the cultural affairs of an embassy before, and then you come to NATO and you write communiques. As an ambassador, you have the advantage that you kind of cover everything a little bit because you are at the head of the organization. So from one meeting dealing with bilateral relations, I may jump into another meeting dealing with, I don't know, I make it up, the ICC. And the next meeting then again would be about some international negotiations around cyber or NATO issues. So it's very different from issue to issue. I like that challenge to change. And I also like the life of a diplomat, but I can tell you for a family, for my wife and for my kids, it could mean a different challenge. And so it's not just, as we say in German, it's nicht nur Gold, was glänzt. It has also a downside.
Thank you for that. So as you have already mentioned, you worked and lived in various countries up until this point in your career. So we're very curious to ask, what in your opinion can be done to overcome some of the difficulties which may arise in situations where people from different cultural backgrounds need to cooperate? And have you ever experienced such a situation yourself? How did you cope with it?
Basically, always had to deal with that because I lived in different countries such as Japan, Haiti, Brazil, United States, UK, Belgium, Netherlands, and Germany, naturally. So that means there's a lot of differences. And I think there are two different ways. Sometimes diplomats try to be, how should I put it, not to jump too much on each other's toe, and be careful with each other, respect each other, and also respect the sensitivities of other people. So to always be able to remain in touch with each other and keep dialogue. But at the same time to time, when you want to get something done, let me put it that way, from time to time, then you also need to make a little bit of an effort to reach a breakthrough in a different difficult situation, a stalemate, etc. And so you always need to see the balance between, on the one hand, being very diplomatic, and on the other hand, from time to time, be a little bit more pushy. And I think that's sometimes the main question, when to be the one who is very patient and when to be the one who's now trying to move forward a little bit.
For explaining to us this challenge. We know that you already have years of experience as being the ambassador of Germany to the Netherlands, and we are really curious to know what your Excellency's current tasks are and what is next on the agenda, being Germany's ambassador to the Netherlands.
Being the ambassador to the Netherlands, and also to give you, because that might be more interesting to you, to give you a little bit of a comparison how otherwise it can be. I was the ambassador to Brazil before, now to the Netherlands. So the main difference is it's a neighboring country and it's very close in terms of geography. So before Corona, now everything is a little different. Before Corona, you had lots of visitors coming here, not just from the Federal Republic, from the federal government, I mean, but also from what we call in German die Bundesländer, the federal states. So I've had visitors from all the different federal states in Germany, because the Netherlands is so close and there's so much going on. So sometimes as an ambassador, you cannot always know immediately who's talking to whom, even between the governments. There are so many direct contacts between us as neighboring countries that an ambassador cannot cover everything. In Brazil, I could be more sure that most things would come across my desk first and then move further on to Berlin. In this position here, I can't be assured of that. And that's okay, that's fine. So the main issues in the past year perhaps were naturally Corona. We have a lot of business between our two countries, what most Dutch even don't realize, and certainly most Germans not. The Dutch are actually our second biggest trading partner. So after China, it is the Netherlands, before France and the US. I think that's, for a country of 17 million, that's quite remarkable. We work very close together in foreign and security policy. Actually, our armies are in many senses integrated, starting with the so-called Dutch-German corps in Münster, but going further down, 4 levels down. We work in all the missions together. So that is a very close relationship. Our values when it comes to international relations are very much the same, rule of law, etc. And not to underestimate the cultural exchange. Many Dutch take an interest in what's happening in the German cultural scene, vice versa. And you have a lot of exchange of people working in that field. For example, the head of the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam used to be the head of the Bundeskunsthalle in Bonn. the head of the Schauspielhaus in Bochum, which is very famous, being avant-garde, so to say. Johan Simons is Dutch, and I could go on and on. There are many examples. There's one thing which I do regret in our bilateral relationship, and that is something relating more to your generation. That is the decrease in the knowledge about each other's language. I think in my generation, the Dutch, most of them still at least understand, but also most speak German. In younger generations, that has decreased quite a lot, and I find that a pity because we are neighboring countries. So I think it would be actually good. We all speak English, and that's fair, that's important, but I think it should also be an effort to learn the language of your neighbor.
Perfect. Thank you for that. As you have mentioned the pandemic and its implications, we're really curious about how this pandemic has shaped your role as ambassador and what sort of challenges has the embassy faced and what efforts has the embassy taken to address them?
Indicated in many ways, Germany, when it comes to Dutch-German relations, is not just the federal level, it's also the Bundesländer. So last year, I was very happy, I can say, that the German-Dutch border was kept open during what we call the first wave. There were many other borders where there were border controls, etc., even closures. That border here remained open. There were no border controls at that time. So that was something which I found really, really positive and which was very important to me as the German ambassador here. You remember we also had during the first wave of the pandemic, we had a situation where for some Dutch hospitals, the situation became pretty dire and Germany took over some of the patients. When I say Germany, again, yes, many in North Rhine-Westphalia, but not just in North Rhine-Westphalia. There were also some in other federal states. You know, that there's always an effort to try to make sure that you keep an eye on what's happening in the border areas. People work on either side of the border, so people live on one side and work on the other side. There are things you need to keep in mind. We call it in German the Pendler, Grenzpendler, and there are thousands on that border. And so that is something we were working on, and I think we did quite well last year in keeping the good relations going, even in a difficult period. We also installed what we call the Corona Task Force. You may have noticed that this was celebrating 1 year of existence on Friday. So they made a bit of a press event of that. The Corona Task Force was established of people from North Rhine-Westphalia, Niedersachsen, the Netherlands, and Belgium to make sure there was cross-border information and coordination.
Perfect, thank you for that. We will now be moving on to today's event on the current political issues. So stemming from the positions that you held with NATO and the former NATO Assistant Secretary General for Political Affairs and Security Policy, what, according to you, have been some of the major achievements in Germany's diplomatic history up until now?
Speak about Germany's diplomatic history, I take it we're talking post-war II, right? Okay.
Yes.
I think to give it a bit of a historic brush, I think you can link it somewhat also to names. So I think the main success of our first chancellor was what we call die Westbindung, to make sure that Germany was firmly anchored in the family of democratic nations. You know, it took a while then for Germany to join NATO, but we were a founding member of the European, no, it was not the European Union at that time, it was the European Economic Community, and so we joined that as a founding member. So that was, I think, a major achievement. And I can say, looking backwards also, 75 years of Befreiung last year here in the Netherlands, there was, after the war, there was quite some work to be done on reconciliation, you call it in English. In Germany, you have two words, Versöhnung and Aussöhnung, and they do have some nuances. And I think we worked very hard to achieve that with the Netherlands. There were, as you can imagine, a lot of bad feelings towards Germany after the Second World War. Then you had Brandt, the Ostpolitik, which was, so to say, the other puzzle after entering Germany in the Western democracies. The Ostpolitik was essential to achieve a lasting peace in Europe. And finally, to make sure that the unification of Germany was not a hindrance to European integration. I think that were indeed the major achievements. And I think now I make a big jump. Another achievement was actually last year, just to take one example, the EU presidency, when Germany had the EU presidency, and we had the task of coming to a closure on the debate around economic recovery for Europe. And I think Germany was then quite successful in the end to hammer out a compromise, which involved various elements. As you know, it was not just about the exact number of grants or credits. There were other issues involved as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for informing us about the German diplomatic history. I think we all agree that there are, especially the recent point, there was something I did not know. So thank you very much. And we would just like to ask you about the bilateral relationship between Germany and the Netherlands. What are the core values the German and Dutch government share when it comes to external policies?
I think, we are both close allies and partners in the European Union and at NATO. So I think most of the international issues, we actually agree with each other. We were very busy in the last years together, Germany and the Netherlands, in what we call the Alliance for Multilateralism. We were afraid that our work in multilateral institutions and in the multilateral spirit actually came under some pressure from different sides. And you know what I'm referring to. So we were working very close with the Dutch in this respect. We worked very close in the European Union. Also, I mentioned just a moment ago the economic recovery package, which the European Union did last year. In the beginning, there were differences, but together we were able to work out a compromise. As I indicated also a moment before, we work together on all our missions. The German army and the Dutch army are maybe one where it's not the case, but other than that, we are always together. I think we now in the future will have together a very important debate how to now relate to China in the future. What does the new American administration mean for us? We had 4 different years. Now we have a new administration. So that are the big issues, how to relate to Russia. And it is very evident for me that this particular relationship, given the MH17, is not just political, but also something which many people here in this country feel about, very emotional also, deeply emotional also. So all these issues are on the table, and I think on most of them we actually do agree.
Thank you for that so much. It's clearly very evident that Germany and the Netherlands do share such a close relationship, not just geographically, but on the topic of trade. So on that note, we know that you have a vast amount of knowledge as a political counsellor in the United Kingdom, and with Brexit being such an important and developing issue for the European Union as a whole, as well as for Germany and its external relations, we would now like to ask you a few questions about this matter. So first, seeing as a lot of companies are now moving their headquarters from the United Kingdom to the Netherlands, how do you envision that the economical relationship with Germany and the Netherlands will change in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think that's a bit early in the days, so to say. We have seen that at the end of last year, so to say, when we were in the last days of the negotiations, there was a lot of nightmarish expectations how everything could become bottled up, so to say, huge bottlenecks in the harbors, etc. That didn't come like this. On the other hand, at the beginning of this year, you see that there's a lot of hesitation on the side of some transport companies and exporters to do some business because they think it has become too difficult, too bureaucratic. So what it means is this still needs to come into a new normality, so to say. There are hiccups, and that was expected. But you know, when I came here, I must admit it was clear to me it's important for this country in terms of the politics and the economics. Same for Germany. I think the UK is number 5 on our trading list. But I didn't quite imagine how emotional this issue is for the Dutch. They had a very close relationship with the British, and the British leaving was something where many Dutch people felt very hard about. So it's about numbers, it's about business, but it's also about politics. I think in the past, it was sometimes very convenient for our Dutch colleagues to have a balance between Bonn and then Berlin and London. And post-Brexit, things are not so easy anymore. So you have all these areas that needs to level to a new situation in business. And you mentioned that Amsterdam is having some profit of it. So do some other, not capitals, cities like I think Frankfurt and Paris, according to what I've seen. So there are various cities profiting, but very much also Amsterdam. I only mentioned one, which is the EMA, the European Medical Agency, apart from business. So yes, there's some profit, but I think all of us still now think basically we would have much preferred this not to happen. That is still the truth of it.
So, as you have already initiated the impact of the Brexit to Germany, and as we're also aware that you have expertise in the field of economics and business administration, as you said earlier, connected to that, as Germany is the 3rd biggest exporter in the world, what do you think are the consequences of the Brexit when it comes to economical matters? Like, how much is Germany actually impacted by the Brexit?
That really is, as I indicated, they are number 5 in our list. But perhaps I should make one point clear that the first 4, China, the Netherlands, US, and France, are, so to say, in a group of themselves. So there's quite a big difference between the first 4 and then anybody else following later. And number 5 would be the UK. Still, for many companies, it is a big market. I take only the German car industry, where the UK is one of the most important markets, actually also production facilities in the UK. So I don't want to minimize that. And some of that will take an impact. But there's more to that because, you know, trade and trade agreements are done by the European Union. And in the past, that would then also cover the UK. So the UK will now do its own trade agreements. We will need to see how that works out for us, how that relates to us and what we are doing with other international partners. And in that sense, it's something which we will only be able to grasp in the long term. That is the unknown of the situation. The short term and medium means some losses, no doubt about that. The long term, we will have to see how that relationship will be able to reestablish itself. And that's difficult to say now.
Thank you for that. As you have already emphasized a lot, economics are important, but the politics of it all is also quite pressing in the situation. So a political situation we would like to discuss with you is the issue of the refugee crisis. So from your point of view, how has the relationship between European countries and Germany changed after the mass migration of 2015?
First of all, I think what everybody realized in Germany, but also, as I understand, in this country, in Denmark, and particularly Sweden, in 2015, 2016, that was the overriding story, also domestically. And so a lot of what we had to do was related to that. With the Netherlands, as I indicated, we were both countries where the people wanted to go to. So we were sitting a little bit in the same situation. And it so happened that, in 2016, I think it was, the European Union was able to negotiate a particular understanding with Turkey, and the Dutch had EU presidency at that time. So I think in that moment, which was a very important moment, there was a very close cooperation between Germany and the Netherlands. We both needed to come to terms with the situation. The numbers in Germany were quite a lot. We got over 1 million. Nowadays, the public debate about it has receded a little bit, mainly also because of Corona. But there's still an ongoing process, because at some point in time, it was the refugee crisis. Now, refugees are there, so it is much more the story about what we call integration. So how to organize language courses, how to organize housing, how to organize job possibilities. And there you will be, as is natural, you will be able to see very different developments. You have some who have a very smooth transition into integration, got jobs, learned German, etc., and some for whom it is much more difficult and who are still grappling. So there's not one size fits all for that. But it's less of a burning issue in Germany domestically right now. Now coming to Europe, I think it was indeed for some Germans very hard to realize that some of the other countries were not coming to support on the issue of taking refugees and trying to integrate some of them. Some in Germany found it very difficult to accept that. That was for them a breach of solidarity. And they understood that Germany is called upon solidarity in many aspects. Here, that was something where the Germans expected solidarity from other European countries, and where some would not give that. It has been a moment of difficult debate. Then last year, when we had the presidency, we tried to make some momentum in that debate, because, there's a European debate about a new general asylum and immigration policy. We were not able to come to an agreement. We made some progress, but we didn't come to a final agreement. And that is the one issue which we had to leave to the Portuguese presidency. And again, you could see there were those who had taken some more refugees, those who resisted, and it is very difficult to make a compromise in the European sphere between so fundamentally different approaches to the refugee crisis. And then let's not forget, it's not just about those who got the refugees and those who oppose taking any. You also have the situation of countries in particular, like Greece and Italy, who get the first wave of the migration. So they also have their own interest in that. And that also needs to be taken into account. For example, from this island, Greek island Lesbos, we took 200 youngsters. Many other Europeans were finding it difficult to take any. So, yeah, it still remains a difficult issue until now, but it's perhaps less burning than it was 5 years ago.
You. So as you've already mentioned the challenge of integration, we would like to ask you, what should, in your opinion, be the main objectives when it comes to promoting integration of immigrating refugees in the future?
Personal comment. In Germany, it's very difficult for newly arrived refugees to become to be part of the labor market. That's for example something where that's a personal comment now, which I find very difficult. When you, for example, look at the US, they have other problems with migration as we see these days. But once in, so to say, refugees find it easier to get jobs. And when I imagine that you sit in these centers for refugees and you wait for your asylum process and you sit in that center all day long, and then you're not allowed to enter the job market. I find that, personally speaking, very difficult. And for me, that would be one place where one should really try to change things. But again, that is not me speaking as the ambassador. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you for that personal opinion. We lastly want to address the Nord Stream 2 project, another very pressing matter in the international community at the moment. Seeing as opinions within the EU are divided on the Nord Stream 2 project, and with Germany being directly affected, what is Germany's stance on this issue, and what is your own opinion on the topic?
So you have a debate within Europe. You have a debate also within Germany, because you know that I think the Greens are not in favor of it. Others are in favor of it. You have a debate in Europe. You have a debate between Europe and the East with very different views in Poland or in Russia, as you can imagine. And on top of it, last not least, you also have a debate with the United States, because in the United States, you have a policy issue there coming not only from the administration, but from the US Congress. And that, I think, is important. It's not just a matter of the government, it's also a matter of the Congress. For me, personally speaking, which is difficult on an issue like that, as you can imagine, because it's so hotly debated in the political sphere. So it's, as an ambassador, to have a personal view on that is not always easy. But I think the main argument which is being used from time to time here is that it would make Germany too dependent on gas from Russia. And in that sense, it would mean that we would lose our political independence and become prey to pressure. That one, quite honestly, I don't buy, because we in Germany are making a lot of efforts to not just have gas or before oil, but we really work very hard to become not self-sufficient. You always need something else, but we work very hard to increase the quota of what we call alternative energy in our energy consumption. And we are quite successful on that line, coming to wind, coming to solar power, etc. So Germany is having a bit of a struggle right now. You can call it self-inflicted, if you like, because we do at the same time go out of nuclear energy. That is a decision in Germany. And after that, we decided to go out of coal. So we are going out of two major energy sources. So we will have more alternative energy, but we also need something to add to that mix. And that one thing to add to the mix for us was gas. But we will not, that's how we see it, depend on, in that sense, on Russian gas, that we would be completely prey. I think you can turn it the other way around. They certainly also need to sell their gas. And so you really could ask yourself who's more dependent on whom. There's one important consideration, that is, until now, so to say, the gas was going through pipelines, transit pipelines in Ukraine. And that is something we also respect, that we need to make sure that Ukraine would not take too much of a hit through a new pipeline. That's something we are working with the European Commission. But I think it's fair to say that it is a hotly disputed issue in Europe, and as I indicated, also within my own country.
Thank you so much for that. As you've very nicely pointed out, this is a very complex issue. and very difficult to discuss, obviously, for you. So to make matters even more complicated, we would like to ask you about the recent political events with the leader of the Russian opposition party, Alexei Navalny, and his recent recovery in Germany, and how is that going to affect the completion of the Nord Stream 2 project?
Didn't make a link there between these two events, but mind you, Germany was the one country which immediately stepped forward when the poison attack on Navalny happened. We made sure that he could be taken out of the, I've forgotten which city it was, I think it was Ufa, that he could be taken from Ufa immediately to Berlin, to the Charité, so that we could make sure that he was able to recover. And we did that immediately. We also were very much part of the following debate on sanctions, as you can imagine. And that has not been the only issue lately. We have had some cyber incidents, including, you know, official quarters, German Bundestag. There is a process going on at this very moment in Berlin about a shooting of an opposition person in the Tiergarten, which is the park in the middle of Berlin. So we do have issues, and we make them very clear, and we don't shy away from saying that. But we have not made the Nord Stream debate to be part of the Navalny debate.
Thank you very much. Before we continue to move on to the questions from the public, seeing as Germans make up the largest number of international students in the Netherlands, what do you think encouraged students to study in the Netherlands?
That's quite fascinating. The number is indeed very large, and to my chagrin, the number of Dutch students in Germany is much lower. I'm not quite sure about why that is, but the number is much lower. I think it is around 2,000 Dutch in Germany, and so there's this manifold the number of Germans here. I think there are various issues. The high quality of Dutch universities, and relatively speaking, it is affordable when you compare it to other countries and still has a good level of quality. Lots of the courses are being done in English, so it's good for international courses. It's good also in terms of coming together with people from other countries. You see that in particular in Maastricht, but also here and in the Leiden, the Hague campus. You see it in universities like Rotterdam and Utrecht, many international students. And the other thing, perhaps, when you look at universities like Groningen, Enschede, Nijmegen, and Maastricht, I think there's an element also of North Rhine-Westphalia bordering the Netherlands. So I think it's also kind of easy for some German students coming from the Rhineland or Münsterland area. And I'm not quite sure whether they are not what we call Pendline away. So that comes on top of it, I must say.
And adding this on this note, we would like to know what kind of support does the embassy provide for the students?
There's not much of a direct support for students here between Germany and the Netherlands. You can go back and forth very easily, both members of the European Union and neighboring countries. So students who want to come here from Germany can very much do that on their own. But you know, German institutions is not just the embassy. So when it comes to other issues, we have, for example, the Deutschland Institute in Amsterdam, linked to the University of Amsterdam Institute about Germany. And they have a desk there which is being covered by people from what we call the German Academic Exchange Service. So they actually have people there who do advise people from Germany who want to study here, give them information and give them contacts, etc. For Germans, they're DAAD. I'm sure that German students will realize what organization I'm talking about. So they do help and they are present here, but they are not at the embassy.
Thank you so much for your answers to our questions. We will now be opening the floor for questions from the attendees. And for those of you, watching from YouTube, feel free to add your questions in the chat. And we will begin with questions that were sent to us in the sign-up form. Then we will move on to questions from the present audience here on WebEx. Please be aware that priority will be given to those raising their hands if they wish to ask a question. So my first question for Your Excellency is, with the rise of EU skepticism and Brexit, has the position of Germany in foreign relations with other EU states shifted, taking into consideration the fact that Germany alongside France are pseudo-leaders of the European Union?
I like the word pseudo. Yes, did it shift? I don't think it really shifted, but it means that you even need to work harder. The Brexit was quite a depressing event for us, but you know, life goes on, and we needed to work too much, so to say, on the Brexit in a situation where actually we had challenges from elsewhere, which we would have to confront. So many of our diplomats did actually have to spend a lot of time on something which was related to an exit and not related to efforts on moving forward. So that was a bit of a difficult situation. I think when it comes to the rise of Euroscepticism, the EU in the last year was very good when it came to coming together on that economic recovery package. We right now face a situation where there's criticism in some countries vis-a-vis the vaccination program. So I don't think that has helped the image of the EU that much. But then look at the perceived Euroscepticism. In this country, people from the outside were making comments about, oh, now we had a Brexit, and then who else might be leaving? Would we have an exit sometime soon? That didn't come around like this. You have Euroscepticism here. Clearly, yes, you had some success of parties which have that within their program. But on the other hand, at the last elections, you could see that parties who are very much open to European integration, I think one needs to make sure that one does not always put everything into one pot. They are not necessarily all against Europe if they are not in favor of European integration. But those who are in favor of more European integration, like D66 and the new party Volt, were actually making a very strong showing. So it's not always the same, and you know, in countries like you have some countries which have by tradition been a little bit more distant to European integration than others. So that's not completely new. And I think the only answer to that is make a good job like we did last year and try to move forward. I think that's that the best thing to make people convinced about this idea is success. I personally, and that is very much a personal comment, apart from that economic issues, etc., and the solidarity when it comes to a dire situation like the pandemic, I personally still believe that it's also an argument, and I would think also for younger people, to see that the European Union not just gave us stability, but also peace within our continent. And even it started as a peace project. And still nowadays, I think from time to time, we should remind ourselves that this was the beginning. And I still believe that it has also its merits on that side.
Going to continue with a question from the chat. Do you think the current pandemic will have a lasting impact on how international diplomacy is and will be conducted?
Yeah, that's a good one. On a very practical level, I think this, you know, everybody says, oh, virtual is not the same. I would like to meet people in person again. True, that's very true. But I think when it comes to conferences where you travel around the globe for, you know, a one-day conference and you sit 2 days in the plane, there I think people will think twice over now whether they really, really want to do that or whether there's perhaps another means of doing that. I think the pandemic is making a challenge to us when it comes to international solidarity. That's also a personal comment now. I think we're all now running, so to say, to the clock to make sure that we get vaccinated as quickly as possible. We have the COVAX program, which is very good. We support this program with 2 billion, I think it's dollars, and that dollars or euros, but that doesn't make too much of a difference. Because in essence, this is an issue where the world is at fire and where we make sure that each and everyone is taking along. So the COVAX program is something I would like to highlight. And then even out of self-interest, as long as we haven't been able to give the chance of vaccination to every country, we will all be living with a remaining risk. So here, this is something we are in together. And I think that's something where I would like even more impetus on.
Thank you so much for that. That's very thought-provoking of you to really emphasize that. I just want to ask if anybody from the audience has a question, if they wish to raise their hand. Yeah, Philip?
Hello, Mr. Brengelmann. I just have a question. Let's go away a little bit from politics and more to the area of your working structure. And my question would be, when it comes to the working structure as an ambassador, who sets out the tasks for the different ambassadors situated in different locations around the world? Is there like a federal agency in Germany responsible for this? Or, yeah, and which agency would be responsible? Sorry?
Sind Sie Deutscher? Der Nachname.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there is an agency, and the name of that agency is Auswärtiges Amt, translated Foreign Office. It is a traditional name which we kept from old days, so to say. It was Auswärtige Amt many years ago, and so you get a general outline of what your mission is. You negotiate a mission statement with your head office when you're leaving. But apart from that, day to day, the ambassador is running the shop, so to say. So you speak to your colleagues, you speak to your head office, and then you make out who's doing what and what is the priority. So it's some dialogue with head office, some dialogue with your colleagues at the embassy. But in the end, you also need to bring in your own expertise and your own training and your own ideas. So I don't have anybody describing whom I should meet tomorrow. That is my own responsibility. And so we discuss together the main priorities, but how I'm going about that job and how I fill my day, if you like, that's my own call.
Perfect, thank you. We have another question from Romina.
Yes, hello, thank you very much. I was just wondering, because obviously as a diplomat, you are in very elite circles, and I personally would love to become a diplomat. However, I'm from a classical Arbeiterfamilie. So my question would be, in your view, Your Excellency, if there's there might be a problem with that, with me trying to become a diplomat and not being from such elite circles or an educational background, because I'm the first one in my university to go, in my family to go to university. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I take it from what you said in between that you are also from Germany, and you know, I personally have seen very different colleagues in my field of activity. When it comes to the academic background, I'll come to the other question in a moment. So yes, there are a lot of lawyers and a lot of economists, historians, but we also have, in my promotion, somebody who studied theology. I have somebody who studied physics. I have a doctor in my promotion, a medical doctor, I mean. What else? Two teachers, so I could go on. Again, many of them lawyers and economics. That's certainly true. So, and in terms of the background, you do have everything. I must admit, in my own promotion, we had a rather big proportion of noble families. That's not so much the case anymore these days. But in my own promotion, it actually happened to be like this. But we also had people coming from a working family background in the Ruhrgebiet area. There were two of them. And so I don't think it is a problem. There are two other reflections. One, you need to look at what do you bring to the academic table when it's coming to the test, because each year when they take in the new promotion, you have to do a test. So that is basically what do you know, which areas you feel confident in. And the other one is, as I mentioned in the beginning, how do you feel personally about that life? Do you feel inside yourself? I don't want to overdo it. Do you feel the fire in yourself to do that job? And do you think you can portray that desire also to others and express it, why you're so keen on doing that? And I think that's perhaps more important than the question from where are you? So I don't want to belittle it. I know that it is not always easy for people who had more problems to get the means and capabilities. You now see that also during the Corona debate, because from time to time it does play a role whether or not you have your own capacity for virtual teaching or virtual schooling, or whether you don't have it. That can make a difference these days, whether you sit in a kitchen with four other siblings and everybody is having noise from everybody else. So yes, it can play a role, but not in this respect when it comes to the decision on whom to take in or not.
Okay, I certainly do bring what I would like to say, something to the table. I study global law, I speak Mandarin, and I certainly do have to fire for it. It's more a question of how I would personally feel in these circles, of course. But thank you so much for your answer.
You are here in The Hague, so what I can offer to you is come by and have a word with, would be able to set you up with one of my colleagues who would be glad to discuss that with you more in person, because I can understand that this is something which can also be deeply personal. So if you want, send me a little note and we'll be able to set you up.
I live in Rotterdam, so that would be absolutely awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Perfect. So we have, sorry, we have another question from Alessandra.
Yes, thank you. So Your Excellency was talking about the importance of a passion for the job. And so I would like to ask Your Excellency what fascinates you about your job and what made you choose this step in your career to become an ambassador?
Yeah, as I indicated in the very beginning, it started perhaps with being close to the capital, hearing a lot about politics, traveling a lot did contribute to it. So, but you know, I let me put it that way. I started my professional life as a banker. So first I worked for a bank for a few years, and then I decided to switch again because I found it just more stimulating to work on issues related to peace, international stability, etc., than just to earn a heck of money. And that is a very personal call, and everybody needs to decide that for himself, what is his priority in life. And I found that I had more of an appetite for that. And I never regretted it after 35 years or more in the service, and would still if I had to decide again, still do that. What do I like about it? You get to meet very different people. You work in different countries and you work in different jobs. So it is really never becoming boring, that I can tell you. Not everybody, I must admit, will be able to make it to the ambassadorship. So be an ambassador at the end of your career is certainly a highlight of that. There's no guarantee that you make it to that. But I would say that also to be head of a particular department in an embassy can be really fulfilling when you, for example, in this city, and I know my colleague, the legal advisor, is listening in to our debate. When you ask him about his satisfaction with his job as legal advisor, you would find out that also can be very satisfactory. So it is not just one issue you are dealing with, it's many different issues, and I think that makes up a fulfilling plate at the end of the day.
So you already talked about the background, academic background, and maybe what your parents do as a requirement. But I'm personally interested, as I am German, but I am of Lebanese heritage. So would that also be a problem if I want to get involved into diplomacy?
If you want to join the Auswärtiges Amt, the only question which can count is you said you're German, so you have a German passport. Yeah, that's it. We don't ask. I have had somebody with whom I was talking a lot over the years, who was, I think his parent had the Palestinian origin. He's a colleague working in the Foreign Office, and we have more than one of that. You would find colleagues in the German Foreign Office who have a Turkish background. You can recognize by the name, but part of the system that has been more lately. It was not in the past, admittedly. But as long as you have a German passport, I don't think anybody would quarrel with where you perhaps might have roots or not. And for example, in most countries, I have realized that the Lebanese are always very good when it comes to international relations. I indicated that I worked in Brazil. So Brazil has 8 million Lebanese, the biggest Lebanese community of the world, more than in Lebanon and more than anywhere else. So they're all over. And so I think as a Lebanese, you have a diplomatic skill from day one. No, I don't think it should bother you in any way. When you feel like it and have a German passport, you can apply, full stop.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Now we have a question from Nina Sophie.
Hi, thank you. Your Excellency, I would like to ask, what is one thing that you would like young legal professionals to know, but somehow they don't?
Okay, that's a good one and a tough one. From what I've seen during my different positions, I realize it's a very personal thing, but you know, you come, you start, you want to learn how to do things, and at a certain point, you need to break away, so to say, from asking or checking in. When is the moment when you take over, so to say, for yourself? So for half a year, you can come and ask your boss. If you still do that after 1.5 years, you will realize that your boss might become a little less patient. So I think that's the most important thing. You have all your knowledge. You know how to write a good analysis. But when do you take charge, so to say? And that is a very important moment. And some feel more self-confident there, others less. And I can tell you, as the one who from time to time is observing people coming in, that is very important. When do you when are you taking charge? You still talk to your boss clearly, but sometimes you need to come and tell him what you think you should be doing and not ask him what you should be doing.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I just have a question if Romina has her hand up because she didn't put it down yet, or if she has another question. Oh, perfect. Great. So we have another question in the chat, and it's from Diana, and says, what should students focus on in terms of their education while pursuing the path of a diplomat?
Oh, as I indicated, we have people with very different backgrounds on this. And that may perhaps have to do more with the question of where in your 30 years, so to say, you might be a diplomat, where would you want to have a certain focus? Because that can be very different. All need to trespass this examen to join the diplomatic school. But afterwards, people can have quite a different level of interest. So some are diehards for European Union affairs. Others are very happy if they are not taken in on that account. Some of our colleagues really like to be in the legal department. Others hope very much that they will never be asked for that. So I think this is more a question on, do you have a particular focus? It starts with a more fundamental question. Are you more a bilateral diplomat? Are you more a multilateral diplomat? These issues can be very different. And I think you need to ask yourself more these questions and then take it from there. For the test, it is the same for everybody. So the Foreign Office will tell you what they want you to do in a test, and there's no running away for anybody.
Next question is, looking back at the knowledge you have accumulated now, what would you tell your younger self?
My younger self?
Yes.
It's very difficult at the moment when you're actually about to retire. What would I tell my younger self? You know, a few years back, we had a debate whether it's still useful to become a German diplomat because the European External Action Service would take over. Now the reality is we have both. We have the European External Action Service, and we have the German and Italian and whatever national diplomatic service. If I would tell my younger self, I enjoyed working in a multilateral organization. So usually I work for Germany. I'm in the German embassy, in the German environment. But when I worked at NATO, I was within the international staff. So next door was a Canadian, Italian, Greek, whatever, and I enjoyed. So perhaps I would, next time I would see whether I could actually enter the European External Action Service for change. Other than that, no regrets.
Great. Thank you so much. We just have a couple of more questions for you. So the first one is, what is something that you would have liked to know before going into diplomacy?
It means for the family. I think that is something one needs to ask oneself. If you feel confident to go to different countries, does your partner feel the same? And what you think, how can you manage that? That is always an important question. How can you manage when you do that with a family? That sometimes you need to hold, to just wait a little bit. So sometimes it may be better to stay in the capital for 8 years because a kid has a certain schooling problem, not leave quickly after 3 or 4 years. That's something which is very personal, but very important. Family situation.
Perfect. Thank you. So I just have another one. Sorry, there's been plenty of interest in this meeting with you here today. So what is one political issue that may affect the diplomatic relationships between Germany and the Netherlands at the moment?
Which may affect, there is no one at this moment where we do have a big difference of interest. Not that I see one right now, and I'm very happy about that. We are on most issues really in sync at this point of time. There's one downside to that, which is there's not much nuisance value in the Dutch-German relations. Sometimes, as an ambassador, you get much more attraction for what you're doing if you have a certain nuisance value of that relationship. Something which is working fine is sometimes finding it more difficult to get a lot of attention, so to say. I need to come to closure in 5 minutes, if that is okay.
Perfect. That's no problem. I just had one more question for you, but we will skip that and conclude our meeting.
I can make.
Sorry?
I said 5. I can do 5 more minutes. I need to conclude in 5 minutes.
Perfect. Okay. I just have one personal question from myself, just in terms of the future of diplomacy and diplomatic relationships around the world. And with, as you said yourself, that you came into this while there was this sort of uncertain future of diplomacy with external relationships in the European Union. I would just like to know, what do you think is the future of diplomatic relationships between countries, seen as, you know, we're such a we're more connected than ever these days. And yeah.
Say that it will not change that much. As a historian, I like to read books about the relationships between countries, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. And it's always remarkable to see how much there was of international relations and interaction, delegations traveling from A to B. Admittedly, sometimes it took a little bit longer. They came back after 2 years of traveling. So, but in all earnest, that always will be a function which will remain to be important. And I'll give you one example. In the European Union, many countries who were trying to make savings were looking at their various postings and embassies. And many countries said, you know, we're all members of the European Union. Everything is basically being decided and done in Brussels. I don't think we need all these embassies in the member states that much anymore. So they were taking them down. Now, especially last year, for example, with these negotiations on the economic recovery package, I think it was very essential to know where is country A or B positioning itself. Not only where are they positioning themselves, because that indeed is something you would also realize through negotiations in Brussels, but then perhaps even more importantly, and why are they doing it? What is the public mood? What is their domestic background? Where are their political parties? Where is their parliament? What role does their parliament play? And reach out to members of parliament, etc. So I think we all came to a realization that maybe it is actually a good idea to also have your embassies in memberships in countries who are members of the European Union or NATO or whatever, to understand each other better, to go and reach out, to foster understanding for your position, and try to help to smooth the way forward. The negotiations will still be done in Brussels. That is true. But the understanding is being, from time to time, helped and created elsewhere.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, and all the best for your professional future in international law or whatsoever. And for Mrs. Müsler, you write me a little note. Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Now.